The Snapshots Music and Arts Foundation presents a conversation with Kurt Loder on his history at MTV. Part 1.
Was it your passion for music that led you into the field of music journalism?
I always loved music, and I was very fortunate to get to write about it. And I worked at Rolling Stone for a long time, and I just love the business. I love music itself, and so one is very lucky to be able to do what one loves to do for a job. And then after 9 years at Rolling Stone, I got a call from MTV, which was in its, I guess, seventh year or something, and they wanted to know if I wanted the job with them. And I wouldn't have worked as a VJ or anything, but they were starting something new, which is a news department. And the guy who's going to be running it was from CNN, so it sounded at least semi-legit and interesting. So I went and started working for them.
What was it like working for MTV, that early period when the network was really getting going?
It was pretty well launched, but I mean, it was, as with anything that's just starting out, there was very loose. And you had the feeling that you could do just about anything. There wasn't a lot of bureaucracy involved yet. You could bring people on that you wouldn't normally think could be on. MTV had made its name on doing unexpected things, so you were very free to do a lot of things. So it was a lot of fun. I mean, it was also a period, you know, and then as the '90s got into gear, where and the tech revolution happened, there was an awful lot of money around, which is always a good thing, I think. There's a lot of money to do shoots, to go out and do on-location stuff. There was a lot of money in the business. I mean, you could say, well, why don't we go shoot this thing in Tokyo, and you'd be off to Tokyo, or you could be off to Paris, or Budapest, or wherever. So there was a lot of money in the business to an extent that there isn't today. And I think it's a very different thing if I were in my 20s or something, getting involved in the television business now. It's very, very, very different. So I'm not sure there's that much fun to be had, although I don't know for certain.
When I interviewed Russ Solomon, the founder of Tower Records, he said, we had a lot of fun. The implication is that it was fun to work in the music business.
Music is fun, so it's important that be maintained. I mean, the music business was always fun when I was working in print also. I mean, it was just, again, it was that time when publicists would take you out for 3-hour lunches and stuff. So it was great, and you could also be flown around to various places to tag along with bands or whatever. And music itself is just fun, obviously. So if you like that scene, if you like people in the music business, if you like musicians, I mean, it was just the ideal thing. Nothing seems to be quite that much fun anymore. I don't know, maybe people can't afford it, but I'm not speaking from a place of absolute knowledge. But at that time, everything was very there was a Baroque sense of enjoyment where people were just throwing a lot of money away and going out to do stuff just because it was fun. I mean, it was that way in society, and it was that way in the music business too.
Is there a particular person that was behind the idea of creating news reporting segments?
Linda Corradina was a vice president there. She was very interested in this, and she had hired Dave Cerolnik, who had been at CNN, and they were going to put together this news show, The Week in Rock, and she decided to give me a shot at it. So, because she had read my stuff in Rolling Stone, and I went over and did a camera test, which I'm sure was really awful, because I had no experience in television and had never had any desire to be on television. And just starting from zero, I mean, you don't know what to do. How do we do this? How do we put this together? And it was a lot of work, but it was, you get good people in to work on it, and it was just fun to do it, because you say, well, let's try this, and there was nobody around to say, no, you can't try that. So you got away with a lot of interesting stuff. I mean, we had John Lee Hooker on once. We had the Ramones play live, stuff that just wouldn't happen today. So that's why it was fun, because it was unbounded. There wasn't a lot of regulation involved.
How did the editorial process work? It seemed as though there were just a few people behind the scenes would decide what stories would be done, and you would be involved in that. How did the editorial process work in covering news stories for MTV?
Well, everybody would come up with ideas, and I mean, I think the final say probably lay somewhere up the chain of command, but Dave Cerolnik, who was running The Week in Rock, was really the guy. I mean, he had a lot of news experience, and his father had been a producer at, I think, CBS for years and years, too, so he really knew television. And he knew if it would work from a logistical point, if we can get to where the story is and do it, if it would work visually, he just knew every angle of it, and whether it was appropriate or whether it'd be fun for our audience. A lot of the consideration was for the audience, and so you'd have to do stuff that was like, what's the big hit of the week? You always have to do that stuff, but you want to do stuff that you wouldn't find anywhere else as well. So he was really into that, and he was mainly the gatekeeper, I guess you'd say, on what would actually get done. And of course, it's also a matter of budgets. And at the end of the year, you don't have quite as much money as you did at the beginning. But he exerted the final say pretty much. But he was very open to doing new stuff, and he wanted to do new stuff. So he was a great guy to have in charge.
There's so many people that you interviewed that were, of course, the most famous music stars of that time.
There's just so much stuff. I wouldn't even know where to begin, I'm afraid. It's good. It's always great to talk to musicians. I mean, to me, I think what musicians do is fascinating. I play a couple instruments very badly myself, so I'm very interested in the technical aspects of it and the lifestyle, where people will go to do stuff. It was a lot of fun talking to Axl Rose, who's not a little unstable as a personality, which makes it all the more interesting. And all the guys around Nirvana were very interesting. There were a lot of really old, we did something early on with Little Richard, in which we both got really drunk at some place on the Sunset Strip and shot that. And that was great. I love, these legendary performers. So there's just so many people we talked to over the course of so many years. I don't think I could nail down one or two that were my favorites.
You mentioned Nirvana and Kurt Cobain. What are your thoughts on that event and the aftermath?
The band was just one of the best bands of that period. They were so great live. They were really, really, really good. They were like the Who of their generation. They just had that kind of power. It's essentially a three-piece band, basically. Well, four. But I know a lot of people were very affected by his death. It was a terrible day, and people always say to me, wow, that must have been an unforgettable experience. But I think when you get the call after first feeling really bad about it, you just go in and do television. You're going to a studio. There are people there you work with every day. You set up shots, and you write stuff, and then you read it off a prompter. I think people sitting out in the real world and getting the news, I think it's probably much more emotionally affecting to them, perhaps. But personally, it was just a terrible thing. It was really a shame, but it wasn't a surprise because he had attempted to kill himself like shortly before that in Rome, I believe. And he was a depressive kind of guy, and he just, it didn't come as a total shock to me. I don't think it was the end of the world or anything, but it was such a waste. He wanted to go on, as we know now, he wanted to go on and do bigger stuff on a broader canvas. He was pretty much finished with the band, as he says in this movie about his son. And he really wanted to move along and do maybe, who knows, work with orchestras or something. Who can tell? So it would have been interesting to see what he did, and it's a shame that he didn't live to do it, but he left behind some great stuff. And I don't think that band falling apart was the end of anything in particular. It was just a terrible loss. But some people like Jimi Hendrix or Buddy Holly, you think, God, they're so young. It's a shame they couldn't have, lived. On the other hand, if they were alive today, they might be, doing something really dumb. So who knows? You can't tell.
Do you feel that we will ever see the kind of innovation that happened with MTV? Do you think we'll ever see an event like that happen again?
Sure. There's always innovation. There's always people doing new things. We just can't predict them. 30 years ago, who would have predicted the internet and how it's transformed society? It was an unusual time. MTV was taking advantage of something, the music video that no one else had taken advantage of, and it was an enormous hit. It couldn't stay that way forever because of the evolution of the internet, and the place to see videos now, of course, is to go to YouTube. Why wait for television? And it was very difficult to use music videos as a method for building ratings, because if you tune in to see, you may stick around for 3 minutes to see a video you love, but if the next video is something you hate, you tune right out again. So it's very hard to get ratings. And MTV just has found it more useful for their purposes to have actual programming, including this reality program, which they've pretty much pioneered. So as much as original MTV fans may hate it, the 90s are over, you have to move on. And they have, and they're serving their audience. It's a mature brand. It's not the same as it was, but what is?
But how did you feel, Kurt, when internally MTV began to shift its core model from music content to reality television programming?
I wasn't really around for that, so that was later on. But they're just following their business plan. I'm not a reality TV fan. I don't tune in for it. I think I watched the Jersey Shore for 3 minutes once, but I'm not that audience. But it's very popular with that audience, and that's the audience they serve, and it works for them as a business plan. So, that's how I feel about it is, irrelevant, I think. I wasn't there at the time that this was taking off, this sort of thing, so not really an authority.
What do you feel makes a culture of music thrive? Is it the exposure of music and the marketing of it, or is it something else connected with the times it exists in?
Make music that people want to hear. That's how it thrives. Has always been the case. People want to hear music that they like. That was the same when Mozart was operating. So there's nothing there. I don't think it's a matter of the times at all. There's always music around. There's no period that hasn't had good music. I can't think of a single period where there was just nothing, where everything was bad. There's always something good. So I don't take the doomsday approach to it. I think it just has to do with the artistry of the performers and the composers involved. Sometimes you seem to get this pile up of really talented people occasionally, but there's always something.
It seems there's been a great leveling where everyone is now back on the road.
On the road is where you make the money these days. That's probably always true. What's changed is that there are no longer gatekeepers. You don't have labels deciding what they think is the best at the moment and signing that act, which everyone complained about once upon a time. But now you have the phenomenon of 5 million bands on the internet all wanting to be discovered, and there being too many of them, and nobody can be discovered, so that's a problem. You sort of need a gatekeeping function of some sort. Somebody has to be kind of a tastemaker.
Billy Corgan said recently, and he's been speaking out quite a bit about kind of contrasting today's climate to what was. He said that in a counterculture in the 60s could not be repeated today. If you wrote a song about the Iraq War, he said no one would care. Does this express where the culture is?
If you wrote a really good song about the Iraq War, it would be a hit. If he's looking back to the 60s, I think that's kind of pathetic, actually. But people wrote, there was this huge war which people were being conscripted into and forced to go die, which is sort of an event that wouldn't happen now since we have an all-volunteer army. That aroused a lot of passion among the people who were, being asked to go die. So it was sort of a one-time thing. If you can speak for some sort of social constituency, that will help. I'm sure there'll be, situations like that in the future. There's just no galvanizing event like the Vietnam War at the moment. But to say that no one cares about political things today is insane, because never before has American society been so politically divided and obsessed. It just doesn't seem, the issues just don't seem to lend themselves to music, but hey, that's okay. I don't think people should look back and say, oh, the good old days, or oh, those were better times, or whatever. You don't know what's coming, and there's going to be more great stuff. And that's a lesson of history. There will always be great stuff coming, so, don't give up hope yet.
It's interesting to see people who were the greatest stars of that time moving forward in today's climate.
Well, Billy Corgan is not what I would call, he's not a star today. I like, or Smashing Pumpkins stuff as much as anybody else, but I wouldn't say he's like a big deal today. He's been sort of futzing around for years and not really hitting his stride, which is okay. He's done great work, and even if he does nothing else, he's got great work he can lay claim to.
Right.
Which is a good thing.
When I spoke with Tabitha, I had asked her about her thoughts about the music industry today. She said it doesn't seem like much of an industry anymore. Well,
it's been undone by iTunes and by sort of the revolution in online distribution. No one knows how to deal with that. And a band can actually create its own career. It doesn't need a record company. It can be done. But not every one of the 15 million bands that want to do it is going to be able to. The industry is nothing like what it used to be. The idea that a lot of music is being given away free or being stolen, which I think is overemphasized on the part of the record company.
To your point earlier, that it's good music that creates demand.
Great music gives you something to sell, for one thing. And music is sold in completely different ways now. It used to be in the 1960s, if you were licensing your big hit song to some company to use in a commercial, it would have been seen as a disgusting sellout, whereas now that's another way to get your music heard. That's totally legitimate. So that's changed. And, you want to be heard on ringtones. You want to have videos out there that even if MTV is not going to play them, they'll be online so you can develop your own following. You can create your own channel. There's so many other ways to promote yourself and build an audience on your own that it's hard to keep track of, really. There are people who erupt out of YouTube, who no one saw coming, and suddenly they have 3 million hits on YouTube and they're stars. So it's kind of exciting in a way because it is new, but I think it baffles a lot of the old live music industry people. It's actually much easier if you're like a young musician. The opportunities are just 100 times more than they were 30 or 40 years ago. You have a lot more freedom, and you have to have a lot more self-reliance.
Continue to Part 2.